Boom, and we are live. And we had David. David was probably in at 12 because I changed it right there around 12. Yep, there he is. He says, "Oh man." I'll throw it up on the screen. He says, "Oh man, moved it to 2. I have a 1 p.m. zone Zoom with NTC on access control, so we might lose David." Felix, Felix Sandoval sent me a little package of a care package of coffee.
Nice.
Yeah, all the way straight from Colombia. Yep, it says it will begin in 5 minutes. So yeah, hopefully we'll get these guys. I don't know. So anyway, we got 3 thumbs up so far. All right, so Kyle Krieger, Thomas Domitrovich, code question of the day. Josh the Sparky just got in the house. Gotta love this stuff, Kyle.
Another fun episode of CQD.
That's right. That's one good way to look at it. Another fun episode of CQD. And so, why don't we do this? So, Thomas Domitrovich with EATON, Director of Codes and Standards, based out of Weirton, West by God, Virginia. With me over there is.
Kyle Krieger, NECA Executive Director, Codes and Standards, headquartered in DC. I am locally in my remote office out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Ah, so you're in Wisconsin. Cheese country.
Cheese country, and as of late, rain country. Lots
Oh,
of rain
yeah.
here.
Yeah. We're losing well, I think we lost a Japanese maple outside. It's been around for a
Oh,
while, and I don't know if it's because of water too much or mulch. I don't know what it is. So I'm trying to save the other one. So don't send any more rain my way. I don't think I need it.
best of luck.
Yes. Today we wanted to talk about maintenance. And there was a code question of the day. I will show everybody this. Boom, I think this gets it. If you go out to NECA's website, necanet.org, you know what? Let's just walk through it. I go to necanet.org. I scroll down to topics. I go to codes and standards. And then we scroll down. Whoop. Yep. Scroll down, and you've got up to code, NECA education, and then you've got right there in the middle, code question of the day. You click on view today's question, and you can see what today's question is. And I think for tomorrow, you have April 20th in there, and then you have April 22nd. And today is what? Today's the 23rd. Now, the other cool thing, the other cool thing I did was I went to archive. And it was, I think it was April 9th was the question that put this on our radar. And Kyle and I were just talking about this, and I did a quick search, which is another cool feature of the CQD archive, is I did a search for maintenance. And when I hit enter, I have 8 pages, 12 items per page of questions that include the word maintenance. Maintenance gets a
But
lot of
maintenance
attention.
isn't covered by the NEC, Tom.
Come on, Kyle, you got to be covered by the NEC. Well, that was the topic, right? So now so Kyle, I know this is debated. I have an
Just a
opinion on
little.
it. It is, and I have an opinion on it, which I'm sure you do as well. And we may be in sync, or we may be of difference of opinion. But my opinion is that the language in various areas of the NEC that say you shall perform maintenance just doesn't make sense for an installation document.
It does not make sense for an installation document. But then, and this is where I start to get into some really, really splitting hairs, right? Um, we cover reconditioning in the NEC. We cover servicing in the NEC. Um, do those belong in an installation document? Do those belong under the
Ooh.
cover of the scope of an installation document? And let me finish the thought here, because I think they do. There's absolutely a place for those. But when reconditioning and servicing becomes a safety of property and people issue, that's when I think that you have to include those requirements into the NEC as they pertain to an electrical installation. And I think maintenance is along the same lines. I I think just flat out having a maintenance requirement in Article 110 probably was not the solution. I think that it's probably deeper than that. We need to take a hard look at the scope and identify when it's going to include those types of rules, right? When are we going to include those types of rules in the NEC? And I think, you look at performance for criteria. We go the same direction with performance criteria. That's not necessarily installation related, right? Unless we tie it to a life safety piece, right? Look in Article 700, performance criteria. How quickly does the system have to turn on? How does it work?
Oh, yeah.
The NEC doesn't care if you wire up a commercial office space and you put receptacles in per plan. There's nothing in the NEC that says they have to work. They have to be free from faults, right?
Yep.
But that performance criteria is typically lacking, and unless it impacts safety, life safety, safety of property, protecting property and people. And I think that maintenance might have a place the same way.
I agree
But this
with you.
question's really specific, right? It talks about it was in the code, now it's not in the code. What's going on with this?
Yeah, so if I look at the actual code question, it says, why was the term maintenance removed from 110.17 of the 2026 code? And so if you looked at the panel statement and the substantiation, if I go to NFPA 70, the 2026, and I go to Article 100, and we look up servicing as a defined term, and I always say the terms servicing, service drop, service lateral. The defined terms is the gateway to the National Electrical Code. And what servicing says is the process of following a manufacturer's set of instructions or applicable industry standards or to analyze, adjust, or perform prescribed actions upon equipment, the intention to preserve or restore the operational performance. And it says in an informational note, servicing often encompasses maintenance and repair activities. Now, what we did, so in the National Electrical Code, when we say servicing, we can encompass maintenance actions that would be performed on that equipment. But to your point earlier, when you said reconditioning, we recently made a change to the requirements of reconditioning because we used to say you shall not recondition. And now we're getting into the discussion or the requirements of you shall not install reconditioned equipment, right? So
to align more with the scope, right, of the NEC.
Exactly.
It's not the NEC's job to determine what equipment can and can't be reconditioned. It's the NEC's job to say whether or not reconditioned equipment can be installed, right?
Right. So it gets back to the installation process. So when I think of maintenance, I would, let's talk. So when I think of maintenance, I think of what you can or should install to facilitate maintenance, which we have examples in the code of where we do that. In Article 700, I think it's, I pulled
permanent provisions for temporary connection of alternate power source or generator.
Exactly. So you've got 700 dot, was it 4, and F, temporary source. And that tells you if you're dealing with one generator, you have to put another inlet in so you can bring a temporary generator. So what? You can perform maintenance on that other generator. And then in 706, 700.6, you have requirements for bypass isolation transfer switches. That's there for when you pull maintenance on the transfer switch. So we have provisions where we require installation of solutions that facilitate maintenance. And to me, that makes a lot more sense than saying you have to do maintenance in the National Electrical Code. And I can't. There are a couple examples of that. I think in 700, right? Um, I think the early sections of 700 talk about performing maintenance, and I can't remember where the other location is. But so they removed that maintenance word out of servicing, out of various areas because it's already included in the defined term of servicing. In informational note that tells you it encompasses that. That was the primary reason they removed it. Now, I made public inputs to remove that last cycle because you can't say, and we could have the debate on whether or not you can say you shall service it or it shall be serviced because the code deals with installation. I'm not going to be calling this up every time I have to pull repair on a piece of equipment unless I'm doing an installation, right? Unless I'm pulling a permit.
So here's where we get into, that slippery slope once again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of danced around this with electrical safety, safe work practices, and those areas where they overlap, right? So if I have an electrical installation, is it safe for people and property as an electrical installation if it's 20 years old and it's never been maintained?
No, that's why you got 70B. And that's why in 70B it tells you you have to perform a maintenance schedule. You have to
Yep.
pull maintenance every so often. You have to ascertain the condition of that equipment. You might maintain something more frequently because it's in a outside next to a marina, and less frequently if it's in a clean room of a data center, so to speak.
And NFPA 70B being elevated to a standard, I think all great steps in this triangle or circle of safety or whatever marketing slogan you want to use, right? We have 70E, 70B, and the NEC now. All, great concepts, but we still have an enforcement gap, right? With 70B and 70E.
Yep.
And we saw it for years and years. So I guess that do you think that there's ever going to be a time where the requirements of 70B and 70 NFPA 70 the NEC overlap, or there's a need for them to support one another? And the example I'll give is 11016, the 2026 version of that. If ever there
So,
was a case for dancing all over a scope of another document, 11016 is probably a good instance of that.
here's my thoughts on that. 110.16 requires you to label equipment with incident energy. Or another method, right? I can label it with a PPE category. Um, it doesn't, and so we could have that debate on whether or not it steps on the toes of 70E when it doesn't tell you how to do that. It just says you need to label this equipment with the arc flash hazard, so to speak, right?
What is that label for? Who is that label for?
For electrical workers. Why do I do working space in front of a piece of equipment? What is that? Who is that working space for? It's for electrical workers. Why do I put barriers inside of service panel boards so that when you turn the breaker off, you have a barrier so you don't accidentally touch something that's energized? That is not there for you or me who are just using a facility or walking through a facility. That's there for the electrical workers. So we have installation requirements in 70 that facilitate safe work practices. I've got
Yep.
GFCI requirements. I've got barriers, line side barriers in 215, 230. I've got working space. None of that encroaches or replaces 70E, but I can I can implement 70E. So when I look at 110.16 and say I have a label there that says here's what your calories are, 70E is going to tell you how to dress. The National Electrical,
Yep.
if the electrical code said here's what you have to wear, I would say now you're stepping on the toes of
It's
70E.
and let me be very clear. I was ecstatic when I saw the new language in
Yeah.
11016 because this is a fight that our contractors have been battling for years, right? Because 70E, much like 70B, it's not what we're accustomed to, or what we think of as traditional enforcements, right?
Yep.
There's no AHJ that adopts it, although I did hear that Delaware maybe is in the process of adopting 70E as a statewide electrical safety document, like their fire commission.
Really?
I don't, and that's not confirmed. So
Interesting.
it's just hearsay at this point, or at least
Yeah.
it was something that I had a discussion with somebody else in passing. But now let's think about, let's keep in the same theme of 11016.
Mm-hmm.
How do, from an electrical safe work practice standpoint, the rules in 11016 support the safe work practices? The rules in 11026 providing working clearance promote safe work practices. The rules in 240.67 and 87 promote safe work practices. What is one of the key tenets of electrical safe work practices? What does every electrical safety program have to have an element that covers? Condition of maintenance.
Yeah, condition of maintenance. Absolutely.
And that's to protect the worker. So how do we
Absolutely.
verify that, right? Has the maintenance been performed? Condition of maintenance. So we have all these other rules in the NEC that support worker safety, but if we don't have anything that addresses the importance of maintenance from a worker safety standpoint in the NEC, is that a gap then?
So, I think you're right, and I think the NEC should include the installation of either technologies or methods that would facilitate ascertaining the condition of maintenance. But just think if you had now, and I know circuit breakers and panel boards and switchboards. Various manufacturers have released technologies over the past years that give you, I don't know, say the temperature,
Continuous
humidity.
monitoring, we'll say.
Yeah, continuous monitoring. Oh, and then if you could take that and say, look, that technology, if you can find where in the power distribution system it makes most sense to say you need to have this technology here, 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 and here, just like we do with Article 700 with generators, with inlets, maybe service equipment, maybe that first panel board on the secondary of a transformer where the risk is higher, and say, look, I'm going to require some technologies that will help you determine the condition of maintenance. So as an electrical worker, you walk in, you know you're going to work on a piece of equipment, it's going to tell you its health. And then if you go to the protecting overcurrent device, it tells you its health. Now you've taken some of that guesswork out of it, because otherwise you're looking for a label that somebody may have put on that piece of equipment that says it was maintained. And then you may have to go back to a maintenance report to see what is it that they did, and figure out, do I feel comfortable enough that when I turn that breaker or that fusible switch off, lock and tag it out, and then go downstream and verify absence of voltage, that whole process is going to be very low risk. I won't say risk free, but I'll say low risk. That's our challenge, right? It's all about the electrical worker being able to get work done safely. And
you can see very quickly how this becomes a slippery slope, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Of where do those requirements belong and all that good stuff.
And what's enforceable and what's not. So and that's why I think, here's what I think. When it comes to safe work practices, I think it's a clearer distinction of things that you can install, or working space barriers, GFCI requirements, arc reduction technologies, things like that. When it comes to maintenance, for some reason, we went straight to, you shall maintain this product or this application, instead of looking at it in a way that says, what would I do differently in this installation to facilitate that maintenance? That's what I think is the harder question to answer. It's easy to say you shall maintain, but then how does an AHJ enforce it? And they're not going to enforce it after initial installation. They're not going to come back in 5 years and say, all right, you were supposed to be maintaining this. Did you maintain it? They're not going to do that. But we struggle with the fact that 70B is not adopted into a state legislature. It's not required by law. outside of some states that might be making moves. I know Brian, oh man, from NEMA, Brian Holland
Oh,
yep,
yeah.
he had indicated there's one or two states that were looking at adopting 70B. Insurance agencies will enforce 70B, but it's a challenge on enforcement of those other documents. And to your point, 70, 70B, and 70E all work together to create a safe installation. That's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think it's education is a big piece of that. And I think you made a great point too, Tom, about the enforceability. When we're talking about various rules in the NEC, that is something that cannot be lost, right? We need to rules that are a contractor, an installer can comply with, but then an AHJ can enforce, right?
Yeah.
And those are the really the two major components: is it can be done and it can be enforced. And I don't know how you enforce maintenance practices, right?
Yeah.
It gets pretty slippery. The requirement for labeling for in 11016 for arc flash, that's easy. We're not asking HJs to do calculations and determine the incident energy. We're asking them to verify that the warning label has been installed and it's got X information on it. You know,
Yep.
um, I don't know how you get there with maintenance. It's an issue. It's a gap that I think we're going to have to come up with a solution for at some point. But I just don't know how we're going to get there.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the best way to get there is to sit down and say, look, we're going to require some things on installation. I put some public inputs in. I think I just put a public input in on for 2029 edition in 230, I think it is. And I think I titled it Protect Service Equipment Protection. And in there, I try to start the discussion of should we require on service equipment IR windows or continuous thermal monitoring. I could make an argument for those absence of voltage indicators, trying to reduce the exposure when you're performing maintenance, similar to the inlet requirement in 700 and the bypass isolation transfer switch and things like that. I think that's the only place in the National Electrical Code that you can start to set, it's like the alley oop where you set it up so that when maintenance
Hmm.
occurs, it can be effective and successful. But to actually require maintenance outside of OSHA coming in and citing issues with an installation that you didn't plug the holes here, because that's the other thing we do in the code. We have that the provisions for open like when if you punch a hole for a raceway,
Closing unused openings.
exactly, closing your unused openings, that's already a part of the NEC. And I would say that's a part of maintenance, and it's more about an installation and less about, hey, every now and then you've got to go back and make sure all of your unused openings are closed up, and we do that on installation. Make sure you close those things up using identified products too. Duct tape doesn't work. You know,
What?
what? Come on, man. If I was a duct tape manufacturer, I'd be suing you. But no, I'd probably be patting me on the back because I'd say, thanks for ensuring our product is not misapplied. We're not MacGyvers. So, all right. So we talked about the NEC requirements. We talked about bridging to safety and the 70E label. Steve is on board. Let's see what Steve has to say. Steve says the enforcement side comes from the OSHA General Clause and other 29 CFR 1910, CFR 1910 and 1926. Oh, NFPA 1, Section 1111 requires NEC compliance, and 1112 requires, there's a hook. Oh, I forgot about NFPA 1. And I'll tell you what, um, Kyle and Steve, I had our West Virginia chapter meeting was this past Tuesday. And I'll tell you what a point of discussion was NFPA 1, because here in West Bygod, Virginia, we adopt NFPA 1. And that is adopted into law, and the fire marshal's office follows that. Now, if section 11.1.2, I'm going to go to section 11, which is building services. 11.1.2, permanent wiring and fixtures. I'm going to make sure I get that right. 11.1.1 requires NEC compliance, and 11.1.2 requires maintenance. Permanent wiring fixtures and equipment. All new electrical wiring fixtures and appliances and equipment shall be installed in accordance with NFPA 70, unless determined to be present to present an imminent danger. Existing electrical wiring fixtures, blah 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 blah. Where the HJ determines that there is sufficient evidence that existing electrical wiring fixtures, appliances, or equipment is potentially unsafe, the HJ is authorized to require an evaluation of that equipment. The qualified person shall provide a report to the HJ of the condition of the electrical wiring for any needed repairs to correct the unsafe conditions, and then permanent wiring abandoned in place. We know about that. So that's 11.1.2. So let's see, if electrical fire safety, 11. That's building services shall apply to permanent and temporary electrical appliances, equipment, fixtures, and wiring. So it does say in there that a qualified person has to provide a report to the AHJ with an assessment of the condition of the electrical wiring, fixtures, appliances, electrical loads, or equipment, along with the recommendations for any needed repairs to correct the unsafe conditions. I would put a star next to that and reference NFPA 70B. And if
That makes
NFPA,
sense.
yeah, and if NFPA 1 is adopted into law, then that's another hook into, that's more in line with requiring maintenance than, and makes more sense. What's the title of NFPA 1? Let's just look at the title of NFPA 1. I'm liking this because before I get there, I just want to look at what's the scope of NFPA 1. I'm getting excited now, man. This is your fire code. Now, the discussion that we had, our state fire marshal wants on commercial buildings a disconnect on the outside of that building. That's his goal. He'll accept some other situations, but what the fire marshals and the firefighters really worry about is going into a structure when it's on fire and they're hosing things down with water. Water and electricity don't mix. They want to establish that electrically, or at least kill power to the, I can't say establish an electrically safe work condition because their verification is hitting it with some water. Okay. So as long as they don't see the sparks and, they can walk away, they know it's done. But they worry about the safety of their firefighters, and maintenance is a part of this for fire safety. I could see
I'm
that tie
curious to see
between maintenance.
if the same language is in the fire code, the IFC, because and the IBC, because that's adopted in a lot of jurisdictions as well.
If I go to ICC Safe and I have a membership, I pay for a membership. Did you know, for ICC codes? So I should be able to come here to codes and standards, professional development, codes and standards homepage, right? Is that where I would go? If I went to iCodes 2024 to 2020, that's information. I want the iCodes. Codes. Oh, geez. I have to click on the button that says codes. There's iCodes, and you want to go to, I'll go to the 2024 iCodes, and you want to do the fire code, right? Oh, there it
Yeah.
is. There it is. It says updated, and it says, Tom and Kyle, please see section. No, just joking. Just kidding. Come on.
They're listening to us.
Ooh, I have to sign in. It says subscribe to premium. I'm like, I'm already subscribed. All right. Many people use this password. Not now. I don't know what password I used. But
Ooh, there's a whole section 110 on maintenance.
no kidding. Which chapter? Chapter 1?
Yep. Chapter 1, section
Service.
110.
That's service utilities?
In the 2024 fire code?
Section 110. Wait a second. Am I in the fire code? Yeah. I'm in the 2021 fire code. You're in the 2020 what?
2024.
2024. International Residential Code. 20 what? Oh, there's the building code. I have. Oh, there it is. International Fire Code. I was in 2021. All right. You said 110. Chapter 1, part 110 is oh my god. That's new. That has to be new because when I was in the 2021, 110 was something different.
Hmm.
You are viewing a historical version. Do you want the most recent? Yes. Why would I want a historical version? 110 maintenance. There's a whole section. And so now, if the fire code is adopted into law, there's your tie to 70B right there. Right? That tells you you have to
Yeah.
perform maintenance. And it says where
Where
any
any device, equipment, system, condition, arrangement, level of protection, or any other feature is required for compliance with provisions of this code. And then it says it's got to be maintained.
Yes.
I would say electrical systems would qualify.
I think you might be right. Now it's a short little chapter. There's you have maintenance or safeguards. You got testing and operation, reinspection and testing, record keep. I was going to say record keeping, record keeping, supervision. That's you. Your supervision, right? Rendering,
No,
and
I'm
then
unsupervised. That's
oh,
what I
you're on.
am.
Oh, that's what that is. Yeah. Or no, you shouldn't be unsupervised. 110.5 is rendering equipment inoperable, and then 110.6 is overcrowding. Overcrowding or admittance of any person beyond the approved capacity of a oh, that's the capacity of a building. So yeah. And what's the A mean in front of it? Does that mean that there's add a bookmark? I don't know what the A means. See, this is my ignorance of the process. There's an A in front of everything. But in any case, so what that tells you is there are some hooks for maintenance requirements that are adopted into law. There's not in there now. It does now. I don't think safe NFPA 70E safe work practices would be here. That's more of an OSHA thing. But maintenance for the fire code is critical. It's not the
Yeah, and that
electrical
makes more
code.
sense from a fire inspection standpoint because they're the ones that go into the facilities once a year and verify that everything's in good working condition. So I can see how that's a little more appropriate for those folks in their jurisdiction.
Yeah, this code establishes regulations affecting or relating to structures, processes, premises, and safeguards the hazard of fire and explosion arising from storage, handling, fire hazards, and structures. So, uh, man, I would love to know who adopts the ICC fire codes. That's a good question for those AI engine. Who
The great
adopts?
state of Wisconsin does.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah,
and
there's
West
some exception. They amend some of it, but in general, they adopt the ICC um, suite, code
Yeah,
suite, if you will.
I'm telling you, Steve, you are the man. He's one of those smart guys out there in the in YouTube land, and turned us on to something that I just learned something new. So thanks, Steve, for joining in, and hopefully Josh the Sparky gets hold of that one and runs, as well as Felix. Well, Felix is in Colombia. I don't know what they do in Colombia, but the ICC publishes the international. So I was just looking at state governments often through the legislature. So what states adopt the ICC fire code? I'm loving this. Man, this is good stuff. So we went from just talking about, and this is the depth that I think these sessions bring to the code question of the day. You're not going to get to this level of an exploration of the code question in that written Q&A, because we got to keep the answers kind of short, and the questions sometimes are short, sometimes they're not. But these discussions really add that third dimension to the code questions, and then just like anything in codes and standards, we noodle around until we learn something new, and we just did. Josh says, "Good afternoon." Oh no, yeah, I scrolled up. So Josh the Sparky is in the house. I still like his logo, but I like Steve's logo too. It's a melted receptacle on his YouTube handle image. But nothing beats Felix Sandoval's Shock Week mug. I'm telling you that. He's got a Shock Week mug. That's the most expensive mug out there in the world. Excellent. All right, so we explored a little bit of ICC and NFPA 1, and we see there's a hook in which I talked to our state fire marshal on Tuesday. I think that there's some more opportunities to reinforce. I didn't think about this one, but there was a few other topics that came up during our West Virginia IAEI chapter meeting, and in my mind, I made a mental note that I got to look at when public inputs are due for NFPA 1 so that I can add some comments and requirements, or even some informative annex information, because they don't follow the NEC style manual. They follow a different style manual, so I can add annex material to that document. But this one now is on my radar, because I think there should be a direct reference to NFPA 70B in there, and if a state adopts it, that's cat's meow. Yeah, that's a mic drop opportunity.
Love it.
Boom. Beautiful. All right, so we hit ICC, we hit NFPA 1, and Felix says Colombian coffee tastes a lot better in the Shock Week mug. It does. You know what? I wish I kept a Shock Week mug, but I've got to do another Shock Week mug with the new logo. And for the price I paid to ship that mug to Felix, I could have bought a plane ticket myself and hand delivered it.
Well, that just sounds like you missed an opportunity then.
I did miss a golden opportunity, yes. All right, beautiful. So we hit the bridge to safety. We talked about that tie to 70E. We still don't have a 70E hook in one of those NFPA documents. Steve says the burned receptacle was on a carpeted wall of an unused recording studio booth where no one was going to notice it if it started on fire. So he had to take a picture of it. Yep. Now, Steve, you took a picture of it, but did you replace it? That's one of those where you say, I got a picture of that. Well, did you replace it? Oh, no, it's still there, but I'm sure he replaced it. Beautiful. Well, that's cool. So with 70E is, hey, Felix, you are welcome so much. So thank you for tuning in. But yeah, so we hit 70, we hit 70E a little bit, but we don't have that same hook that we just found in the fire code. I wonder if there's another ICC code that gets adopted that we could somehow pull in the 70E reference, and then
something to look into.
Absolutely, I like that angle. And then also we found the tie for 70B. And my AI engine is still looking to see a list of states that adopt the ICC fire code. Oh yeah, Steve says he did. Steve, see, this is the thing. Steve doesn't just fix a problem by replacing a receptacle. He says, you know what, that's not good enough. I'm removing the entire wall. So He said that the whole wall was removed, so that was good. That was good. He took the problem and everything around it away. So that's perfect. Beautiful. All right. So we talked about that relationship with 70B. We talked about the relationship with 70E. And we talked about not wanting, making sure that we don't step on each other's toes. We know the electrical code's not trying to be a 70B or 70E, and there's a lot of people involved that fight to make sure that that doesn't that overlap doesn't occur. So we'll stay in our lane, so to speak. Right?
Where's the fun in that?
Well, you know what? So what happens is you get people. Well, you know what? That happened on 517. Remember? They had the heartburn with selective coordination. They said that's a performance requirement. It should be an NFPA 99. And then they reduced the selective coordination requirements by saying it just needs to coordinate to zero point 0.1 seconds, which ignores everything below 0.1 seconds and ignores the amount of fault current that's going to pass through both of those devices.
It
So they
kind of sounds like that rule was pushed by circuit breaker folks. I'm just saying.
I know I was against it. I wasn't against it. I'm in West Virginia, so I was against it. And
Again, it's
I was against it. I did not agree with it. But yes, you're probably right. The circuit breaker manufacturers they didn't fight it as hard, so that's for sure.
yeah.
But I think that there was a safety injustice done there, which still has opportunities to be resolved, in my opinion. Because their biggest complaint was the three-phase bolted fault doesn't occur, and or rarely occurs. And then I can't disagree with that. But then I say that what's the most common fault in a power system is a ground fault.
Which is going to give you your instantaneous trip anyways.
It's exactly right. So and they ignore the ground faults, they ignore the arcing faults, they ignore the three-phase bolted fault, they ignore all fault currents, hide everything below zero point 0.1 seconds, and then just look for separation of curves. So all you're doing is making sure that in the overload region you coordinate, but any level of fault current or inrush currents, right? I mean, it could be an inrush on a transformer. It could be anything that is considered. Well, you're not considering current at all. That's my biggest complaint. I mean, I'm sitting there, and I told the chair of NFPA 99 at one time. I said, "Look, I don't. It doesn't matter to me whether or not you believe a three-phase bolted fault current will occur. That's fine. But that's where the debate has to occur. In what level of fault current do you want to evaluate your overcurrent protective devices to? 0. 0.1 seconds and Article 517 and NFPA 99 ignores fault current completely. As an engineer, I don't think that you can do that for any level of
I'd be
performance.
curious how long ago, without getting too far off track here, I'd be curious to see how. So I think it was about the 2011 edition when they changed that to the 0.1 seconds instead of just referencing 700.32, right?
Yes.
So it used to reference 700.32, and then they changed it and added that 0.1 second in there. So I'd be curious to see, if anybody's tracked data on.
Well, I'll tell you what I was
Facility-wide outages, we'll say.
Yes.
Or widespread outages due to a fault in those facilities.
Here's the problem. If you went into a hospital, or if you went to a designer of a hospital, or you went to the hospital, people who tell you what can be released and not released, they will tell you nothing. But I've done a lot of presentations because I had that same question. So I was doing educational seminars to healthcare maintenance personnel. I would get them in the room. They were typically smaller groups of people. And I would ask them, I would explain what selective coordination is, They would all shake their heads, and I'd ask them, "Have you ever had an event where you had a cascading event?" Almost all the hands would go up, and they would give me the examples of what would happen. Like a half of this hospital was taken out, a quarter of the hospital was taken out. The different faults that happened either at an HVAC unit or a forklift or something where they damaged a piece of equipment, and that fault took out a very large portion of the hospital. But nowhere will you find a statistic, and nowhere will you see where they reported that to any third party group. It
Oh,
just stays in
anecdotal.
that group. Yeah, it's all anecdotal. They'll tell you the stories, they'll tell you what happened. And if you say, well, was it in the news? No. So you can't go to a news report. Was it in the newspaper? Can't go to a newspaper report. Was there anything published on it? Absolutely not. They fixed it and walked away. And nor would you just think if they did publish that information. If you went down and said, okay, I'm going to go over to Swickley Valley Hospital and I'm going to look, boy, they had 17 outages last week. There's no way you would do that. You know what I mean? You wouldn't want that. That's negative publicity. I went to the emergency room here in Weirton, and I forget what I did. I did something. It was either something was in my eye, but usually they put you in one of those gurneys in one of those areas, and this guy comes walking in and he has this big cart. And I asked him, I says, what are you doing? He says, I'm replacing batteries. And he takes the flashlight and he pops the batteries out, puts new batteries in. There's like these cartridge batteries on those little stands that walk around that do the IVs or whatever. He's changing batteries. And I said, is that, I mean, like what part of, he goes, that's all I do all day. He says, I just change batteries. And I said, well, do they ever need them? I mean, outside of, I can understand like one of those things where you're walking down the hallway and you have a battery. I said, has the power ever gone out? And he goes, oh yeah, it goes out all the time. And he mentioned about, different outages. Now, I don't know what the cause was, if it was a utility thing or what it was, but he told me that they definitely use those batteries, and his job is critical for the performance of. And he was in an emergency room too, so it happens in hospitals. I mean, it's I'd say it's human nature, but it's just natural that if you have
Yeah.
a system, it's bound to happen, and you've got to be prepared for it. And what you try to do is just reduce the likelihood of those events from happening, and maintenance and things like coordination, picking the right overcurrent devices, those all play a role. But I, and when I look back at why, they said, oh, because healthcare systems are more reliable in nature, just natural, how they design power systems in healthcare. And I just don't buy it. But I, that's another, what do they call that? The soapbox. I just got up on my soapbox.
Right. We could talk another 2 hours on selective coordination if we wanted to,
I know we could. We
and the
could.
merits, right?
Yes.
So,
Yep. All right. So we're ready for another CQD in another week here, and maybe next week we'll go live again. I don't know if your schedule permits it. We had to push it
well,
out an hour today, but we'll
let's
pick.
do it next week. Next week, Thursday, the 30th. I'm in.
All right, I'm in too. I should have. I might even have Palmer Hickman here in the studio because he and
That
I are
would
going
be
to work on some
awesome.
things. So we might be able to have
Very
two of
cool.
us and you. So
All right.
awesome. All right,
Sounds
brother.
good.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tom.
Thank
Take
you. And
care.
thanks for everybody else who joined in, Kyle or Steve and Felix and Cruz. So great discussion. And I learned something this CQD. Thanks, Kyle. We will see everybody. I got to get an intro and an outro. I don't have one yet.
Start singing.
Yeah, I'll start singing and then I'll hit finish and fade out. All right,
I always
everybody.
thought that like dueling banjos just played all the time in West Virginia.
In
Doesn't that
West by
song
God.
just, isn't it piped through the streets of downtown and everything?
Oh my gosh. Only in Weirton, West by God, Virginia.
All
All right,
right.
everybody. Take care. Stay safe and please stay healthy.